You are arguably the leading expert on all things health, nutrition, and an amazing doctor as well at the Cleveland Clinic. So thanks for being here. I'm super excited about this. You've got a mission that you're on, which is to change the food system we as Americans can have at stores and
what we grow, what we produce, what we process, what we market, what we eat, what we waste. The whole food chain is messed up.
It's really messed up.
It's messed up.
Well, there's a lot of sick people, especially in the US.
At the top level, we have to understand that over the last 40 years, the tsunami has come that we weren't aware was coming, that we weren't prepared for, and still haven't grappled with. And that tsunami is chronic disease and food-related illness.
In 40 years.
In 40 years.
Did we have chronic disease prior to this?
We did, of course we did, but not to the magnitude. We used to have like 5% obesity rates in this country in the early 60s. It's 40% now in most states. So we have 6 out of every 10 Americans who's got a chronic illness, 4 out of 10 who have more than one. By 10 years from now, we're gonna have 83 million with 3 or more chronic diseases: heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer, dementia, you name it. We are having 11 million people, and this is, I think, a conservative estimate, 11 million people around the world die every year from bad food, from ultra-processed food and not enough good food. It's a staggering number that beats out smoking, war, violence, accidents, you name it, nothing else comes close. Not malaria, TB, AIDS, all that is a fraction, a third of the deaths that are caused by chronic illness. And they're mostly preventable, and they're mostly caused by food, and they're mostly caused by the ultra-processed food that our food system produces en masse. It's the biggest industry on the planet. It's $15 trillion, about 17% of the world's global product, and it is controlled by a few dozen CEOs. It's around seed production, agrochemicals, fertilizer, processed food companies. It's staggering how the system has sort of just, over the last 40 years, completely transformed. So we have this staggering problem of chronic illness, which people suffer from, that's bankrupting people, that's bankrupting our country. I mean, think about the amount of economic stress. Many people are not adequately covered, so there's a lot of co-pays. I mean, you know, people can have $10,000, $20,000 in co-pays. I had a patient the other day who, you know, had diabetes, and I fixed his diabetes through food, and he says, I saved $10,000 a year on co-pays. 1 out of every 2 Americans has pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. 1/3 of Medicare spending is on diabetes.
1/3 of Medicare is on diabetes.
Yeah. Medicare, if it was a company, would be the biggest company in the world, $1 trillion budget a year. We have you know, a $22 trillion debt. We have you know, this threat of chronic disease exploding. It's getting worse and worse. Medicare for all is kind of a silly idea, and so is repealing Obamacare. They're neither going to help the problem unless we figure out how to stop people from going into the system in the first place. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. Pancreas fails. It's called, it used to be called juvenile diabetes, and you need insulin. Well, there's been links to dairy, and actually as a driver of type 1 diabetes. Gluten, 29% of people who have type 1 diabetes have celiac that are undiagnosed. So celiac is a big cause of autoimmune diseases, including type 1 diabetes. So that's a very small number of people, very few. 1 out of 2 Americans have what we call type 2 diabetes. We used to call it adult onset, except now kids as young as 3 are getting type 2 diabetes from drinking soda from the crib. And that is when you eat too much sugar and starch, and every time you do that, it raises your insulin. Your body becomes resistant to the insulin, and so it doesn't work as well, so you need more insulin. And insulin does what? Insulin makes you hungry, it makes you store belly fat, it locks the fat in the fat cells, and it slows your metabolism. It's like a quadruple threat for your body to gain weight. So it's why we're seeing, you know, and that goes back to what we're growing, right? So, and so that's the other part of the problem. So we have the chronic disease, we have the economic impact, and then we're like, well, why do we have this food? So as a functional medicine doctor, I'm always asking why. Right? Why would a doctor care about agriculture and soil and all this crap? Because as I was thinking about my patients' diseases, most of them were caused by food and can be cured by food. So you've got me thinking, okay, well, if the patient's disease are caused by food, what's causing the food? It's the food system. And I'm like, well, what's causing the food system? It's our food policies. Like, what's causing our food policies? It's the food industry that's lobbying Congress.
It's got money.
It's the biggest lobby group in Congress is agriculture and food. By far, like by twice as much as the next lobby group. So then I'm thinking, okay, well, what do I need to do as a functional medicine doctor? I need to go to the root cause, right? The root cause and why. And then it became clear to me that it's our agricultural system that's driving so much of the problem. And what we grow has been based on good intentions that were in the 50s and people were hungry, there wasn't enough food, there was a lot of poverty. And so we figured out a system to produce an abundance of starchy calories.
So we can have food.
So we can have food. And we were great at it. And we have cheap, abundant corn and wheat and soy, which are the commodity crops that are turned into industrial processed food, which is now 60% of our diet. And for every 10% of that you eat, your risk of death goes up by 14%. We don't do anything about it because we have these dysfunctional food policies. And then the way we grow the food causes climate change. And we'll get into that, but the number one cause of climate change is our food system. I mean, basically plants suck out carbon dioxide. That's what they breathe. We breathe oxygen, they breathe carbon dioxide. So that's the perfect antidote, right? Yeah. And then the soil also, we're damaging by the way we're farming. We've lost a third of our topsoil. It's responsible, and people don't know this, but of all the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the loss of soil, organic matter, like healthy, rich soil, is responsible for 30 to 40% of all greenhouse gases currently in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. The soil it can hold more carbon than is in the atmosphere right now. Like there's 1 trillion tons of carbon in the atmosphere, which is a lot. I don't know, 1 trillion tons, I don't even know how to measure that. And the soil can hold 3 trillion tons of carbon. And how does it do that? It's an ancient carbon capture technology that is available all over the world, can be more effective than all the rainforests on the planet, than all the forests and trees on the planet. It's called photosynthesis. Carbohydrates comes from the word carbon, which comes from carbon dioxide, right? The soil can hold so much carbon, the UN estimated that if we took the 5 million hectares of degraded farmland around the world, if we took just 2 million of that and spent 300 billion, which is the total military spend for 60 days around the world, so that when you have organic matter in the soil, it holds 27,000 gallons for every 1% organic matter in the soil per acre. So it's an incredible water sink, it's a carbon sink, and we've lost all these soils, and it's because we're growing these commodity crops in ways that destroy soil. And it's staggering. And then we have all these sort of unintended consequences. You know, we started growing all this food and we thought this agricultural revolution was great. All these chemicals are great. You know, fertilizer's great. We can do all this good stuff. Tractors, big farms, more food, feed the world. It's backfired on us.